written notice of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." They crucified 2 rebels with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So you are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days? Come down from the cross and save yourself." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross, and we may see and believe." Those crucified with him also heaped insults on him. After noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And at 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing near heard this, they said, "Listen, he's calling Elijah." Someone ran, filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to take him down," he said. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain in the temple was torn in 2 from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood there in the front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." Some women were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the younger, and of Joseph, and Salome. In Galilee, these women had followed him and cared for his needs. Many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem were also there. So that is the crucifixion of Jesus. What stood out for you in the reading of and your understanding of the crucifixion of Jesus? What came to mind even in this reading here? Anything?
Actually, Mike, one of the things would be that they continued right up until he died, persecuting him, making fun of him.
Yes.
It's almost like too much.
Yeah. They continue till the very end, says Brother John, to continue to mock him, continue to hurl insults at him, even till the very end. Jerry?
I think even some of those that believed in him were taken up with the thoughts of the crowd that because he claimed to be the King of the Jews, and they didn't want to agree with him at that time. Where later on, some of them did after he died.
Yeah. Yes, sir?
Even with their insults, saying that he's calling for Elijah, you can still see their disbelief.
Yes. They wanted a sign there at the very end. Still, if he comes down from the cross now, then we'll believe. But how many things did Jesus not do in their presence that was unbelievable? All the miracles, right? The lame man that was healed at the pool, the lepers that was healed. There's some guy that was raised from the dead. Lazarus, remember that guy? What more could Jesus have done? They just did not believe.
But you got to remember, in the earlier text, it did say that there were false witnesses in that crowd.
Yes.
It just shows the, I won't call it the power, but the influence that false witnesses can have on the masses.
Yes. He said he would destroy the temple in 3 days. Let's see what he's going to do now. Right? Bringing up these false things about him. Yes, sir.
So in John's account, in the documents where he says it's finished here.
Yeah.
My God, my new person.
Yes. There's the two accounts, right? In John's account, he says it is finished. Mark's account, my God, why have thou forsaken me? Interesting. Anything else kind of stand out? Yes, Robert.
I don't know. The curtain was in the temple, right?
Yes.
And it was torn. Was that not destroying the temple? Basically, and then in 3 days.
Yes.
Praise, so.
And the way it was torn too, right? From the top down. I mean, normally you would take the curtain and then till you get it up there, but this one was from the top down, right? that signify, though? What was that about?
I've heard it said that it signifies the doing away of the old law.
Mm.
And I believe, I remember that curtain was like 40 feet tall.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Ooh, 40 feet tall.
Wasn't
Yes.
that curtain like it represented the barrier between the holiness?
Yes. There we go.
So
Mhm.
now that the curtain was torn, and Jesus is the way,
Access. Ooh.
he gave us access
Yes.
to
John 14. Yes. John 14. The way, the truth, and the life, my brother. No one comes to the Father but by me. Yeah, making it possible, right? So, the crucifixion, as we look at it, we recognize that the beating took turns. This is a whole regiment coming up there. Hey, my turn, my turn. Let me have at him. Right? What about Simon on his way? Simon of Cyrene on his way into town is like, hey, you carry the cross for this man. Because he was too weak. They beat him up. How was he going to be able to carry this thing? Heavy. Simon comes and stops Simon to carry the cross for him. A couple of things as we look at Matthew's account. A couple of things in these accounts here. Key elements in Matthew's account: Jesus is marked by soldiers who place the crown of thorns on his head. I remember I had a PE teacher in elementary school, and the grounds where we had was full of thorns, and he had us run bare feet around the field. He says, there's lots of thorns there. I've got a jar here for thorns, so if you step into one, don't throw it away, don't throw it back in the field, bring it home to me and put it in the thing. Everybody's running like this. Oh. And that jar filled up very quickly because they had all the kids running around collecting the thorns for him. This is thorns on his head. This is thorns on his head. Simon the Cyrene is compelled to carry the cross. We saw that. Jesus is crucified at Golgotha, and wine mixed with gall is offered, but refused. The charge against Jesus is written as, this is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Remember, they had a problem with that. The high priest and the leaders didn't want for that inscription to be there. It would give Jesus credence to the fact that, yes, this is what he said. He's Son of God. He's somebody important. They didn't want that. What about darkness covered the land from noon until 3 p.m.? Darkness covered the land. I mean, that would be unusual, right? Isn't the midday sun up at noon really hot? But yet there was darkness. Jesus on the cross. Jesus crying out, my God, why have thou forsaken me? Why have you forsaken me? The temple veil, as Robin made mention, is torn. An earthquake occurs in Matthew's account. We didn't read that in Mark's account, but there was an earthquake that happened in Matthew's account. And the dead are raised again. A Roman centurion and others acknowledge Jesus as the Son of God after his death. Right? So that's Matthew's account. Some unique features about this: the dramatic earthquake, the resurrection of the saints are emphasized in Matthew's account. And then the highlights of fulfilling of the prophecies. Now it's not fulfilled. Yes?
I wanted to say something about the wine and the gall.
Yes.
How they gave that to Jesus, and I read somewhere that that gall actually kind of numbs the body from the extreme pain. And Jesus refused to have it because he wanted to go through the full extent of crucifixion for us.
That's one way to look at it, yeah. One way to look at it. I like that we can see into things like that, right? Let's look at Mark's account. We just did that. Jesus is marked by the soldiers who salute him as King of the Jews. They actually bow down before him. Simon of Cyrene, as we saw that, is forced to carry the cross. Jesus is crucified at the 3rd hour. The inscription, Jesus, the King of the Jews. Darkness covers the land. The cries for, my God, why have you forsaken me? The veil is torn. We read that. And then the centurion that declares, truly this man was the Son of God. That acknowledgement from someone who was not a follower, from someone who was not a believer, someone didn't follow, but he stood there, he recognized everything what was happening, not only the darkness, the graves opening, the earthquake happening, and this man breathing his last. Truly, this was the Son of God. What about Luke's account? In Luke's account, key elements here, Jesus addresses the women of Jerusalem, warning of coming judgment. Oh, Jesus actually talks to the women there, right? Simon of Cyrene carries the cross, and I think that as the women being addressed, I think that's the account where he says, like labor pains. I think he makes reference to that for women. Jesus prays for his executioners. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. We know that very well. The two criminals are crucified with Jesus, one of whom repents and is promised paradise in Luke's account. Today you will be with me in paradise. That's in Luke's account. Darkness and the tearing of the temple veil occurs, and Jesus commends his spirit to the Father. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. That's in Luke's account. Some features or unique features is emphasis on Jesus' compassion, even in suffering. Father, forgive them. They beat him up. They put this crown of thorns on his head. They nailed him to the cross. They hung him on this cross. And then he asked the Father, Father, forgive them. That compassion that Jesus had. Right? And includes the dialogue also for the repentant thief. And then, of course, John's account. Pilate writes the inscription, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews, in 3 languages. Soldiers divided Jesus' garments, fulfilling the scriptures. Jesus ensures his mother's care by entrusting her to disciple John. Women, here's your son. Son, here's your mother. Jesus declares, I thirst, and is given sour wine. His final words, it is finished, as our brother made mention earlier. And his side is pierced, and blood and water flow from it. That side piercing was not in Luke, was not in Mark, was not in Matthew. John makes mention of that. Unique features, strong emphasis on fulfilled prophecy, the detail of the piercing of Jesus' side and the flow of blood and water, and highlight of Jesus' control and fulfillment of his mission. Why was that piercing so important, or at least highlighted in John's account? What would happen? What was the other story that was also part of the piercing? What other story was part of the piercing? There we go. Thomas's disbelief. When Jesus appeared, right? The disciples, hey, if Jesus was here, so unless I see the nail prints in his hand and the side, then I will believe. Next time Jesus appeared there and went straight to Thomas. Thomas, here's come on, doubting Thomas, that's your name, right? Immediately, Thomas says, my Lord, my God. Jesus says, you've seen me, now you believe. Blessed are those who have not seen me and yet believe. That's us. That's us. That's a blessing that we have. All right. Details of the crucifixion process. Matthew has the most detail about legal and the crowd proceedings, the legal proceedings, the court case, the trials that was there. Most of that was there. Mark is focused on the psychological torment Jesus went through. I thought that was interesting. Luke is the most compassionate and highlights individual interactions, right? And then John, most theological, emphasizing the prophetic significance of the crucifixion and what took place there. Some similarities across the Gospels. Jesus is mocked, crucified with criminals, and the inscription, King of the Jews, is placed on the cross. Darkness covers the land, and the temple veil is torn. Witnesses include the Roman soldier and the bystanders who were there, those who were there around the cross. And Jesus dies with a loud cry. There's some contrast between what is said. The specific cry of Jesus differs. Matthew and Mark says, Jesus said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Luke records, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And John records, it is finished. It is finished. There's 4 accounts. A little bit of contrast there. At the very end, the last words of Jesus took place. Unique elements include the earthquake and the resurrection of the saints in Matthew. The dialogue for Luke, the dialogue with the thief, Luke talks about that one. And the piercing of Jesus' side and care for his mother is seen in the book of John. Emotional and psychological perspective. I like this, of course. Matthew emphasizes divine abandonment and cosmic significance. Mark focused on the intense suffering and human vulnerabilities, while Luke highlights compassion, forgiveness, and mercy, and John presents a more theological, almost triumphant narrative of Jesus' sovereignty. I like that they have these different perspectives in these four accounts. Then there's Christological emphasis, where Matthew is about the messianic fulfillment. He came, this was prophesied about him, and he fulfilled what he came to do. Throughout the Gospel of John, we talked about how that God's plan was going to be fulfilled. God's plan was going to be done by Jesus. Nothing was going to stop that. Mark talks about the suffering servant, how he suffered. Luke wrote about the universal redemption and compassion of Jesus, and then the divine word or logos transcending human suffering. In the beginning was the Word was with God, it was with God in the beginning, the Word was God. Verse 14, and the Word became flesh, the logos, transcending divine to become man as well. We see the redemptive suffering is consistent across the Gospels. Jesus, I think Tyrone said it, the suffering had to take place. He had to suffer for us. That had to take place. The cross itself, huge suffering, huge difficulty for him. Prayed in the garden about it, right? The suffering had to take place, and that's consistent across the Gospels. It's recorded for us across the Gospel. Jesus' death is seen as purposeful, not accidental. Hey, let's do this right away. Let's get him to the cross. No, this was part of the plan that God had planned out for mankind's salvation. It was part of the plan. It was purposeful. It wasn't an accident.